Hello. Good evening,
Hello.
everyone. It's the Collins. You can't get rid of me. Chief of Bothering's back. He'll always be here until he's not. Um, but tonight we're joined with Colin. He's been moving. He moved from Austin to New York, so he hasn't been available to stream very much. But like, finally got him on to talk about the creation of the game. So let's you get the Collins tonight. Let's go through kind of the who you are. Obviously, most people know who you are, but let's who you are and what you mean to this game.
And in the, for many, many years. And so, and, and I've been in Discord for a long time as 10, and I'll never speaking to the person. Creator, as Colin just wrote it down. So, and co-founder that will be what's been happening for now. And to expand
Just
on
gonna
it.
make sure, see if the chat can confirm that your audio is good. It's good on. Oh, got some choppiness on Colin's feed. Okay, let's try. Hold on 1 second, everyone. Let's try to get this fixed. I'll be right back. All right, let's see if that did anything. You
I
want to
can
give that?
repeat.
You want to give that another go, Colin?
Yeah, I'll try repeating a lot of what I just said. We tried something different on this end. So please let us know if you can hear me or if I still sound choppy, even if my camera cuts out.
You're looking good on my end. All right.
Okay.
Yeah. So here with Colin. He's gonna introduce himself.
All right, I'll do it again. So
Yeah.
yeah, so I'm Colin, Colin with 1L, 10-man in the Discord versus Colin Kui with the Alpaca Man. I always say we never speak in third person, so hopefully if I say Colin, I'm talking about Colin Cooey over there. So yeah, been part of this friend group for a really long time. A lot of people, we used to joke that I was Colin too, because I was actually the second Colin to join the friend group, which was fun for many years. And then now, when we meet people at conventions, people are like, when they're messaging me, they're like, "Are you the bearded Colin or the one that didn't have a beard?" Which is how people remember us. So yeah, but
Yeah. I'll never be able to shave again.
yeah, you can't. That would actually, we would just confuse people too much. So, but yeah, Colin just wrote the creator down, but CEO and co-founder with this whole team. Been moving from Austin to New York City, and that's been a pretty big process right as we were expanding and starting into doing these on Mondays. So excited to be part of it, and then we'll be doing it more in the future.
Yeah, I think for tonight, since it's Colin's first time on, I think it'd be really interesting to kind of like talk about the inspiration for the world of Luminous. Less like the game aspects of it, and more just like how you came up with the world. I know you've kind of handed off a lot of that to Corey. Corey's head of like creative and things like that, but like most of what Corey's working with is stuff that you've been imagining for at this point decades. So like getting kind of the origins of the world of Ardua, I guess, is like something I know some people are
Yeah.
really interested in. So like where did it come from?
Yeah, let's dive in. Let's go right for it. So, I mean, obviously now Corey is incredible and has a much better mind for the micro and creates characters and is head of creative in every way. Very briefly, I will say we had like probably about 25 to 50 hours over a year and a half that we met alone in one-on-ones. Back, this was 3 or 4 years ago, where I'm going to boil it down tonight into a much shorter form, but where we talked through a lot of what we're going to talk about tonight. And I shared a bunch of things as well as old short stories and documents. And it's just as much his and the whole team as it is mine. But he's really taken it from there. But yeah, we'll start at the beginning. I mean, I grew up just a lover of science fiction and fantasy, reading books like Ender's Game and Ender's Shadow, and then The Hobbit, and like just like even really interesting books like The Thief Lord. There's some I could just talk about a bunch of books that meant a lot to me as a kid, but certainly The Hobbit and then the Lord of the Rings trilogy is like to many of us a huge part of my childhood. So I started writing creative short stories about 12, 13, 14 is when those 3 years is where it really started in a bunch of different forms. But I would say that the idea of everything that is Ardua today really stemmed from my parents mm, not wanting me to ever be in front of a screen and spending my childhood in our neighborhood and in my backyard in rural Tennessee, just running around until the lights came on. So like I would have a stick and it was a sword, and I would just be running around by myself, oftentimes in my backyard or swinging on my swing set. And I was just like, I was never allowed to watch more than 2 hours of TV or an hour of like screen time in front of a computer, even like through high school. So you just get bored and you get bored enough to start making up or dreaming up worlds in your mind. So I had a lot of the ideas for the world, many of which were there in those first short stories. So I can kind of dive in. Should I just dive into the short stories? I guess this is the
Yeah, I mean,
next. Yeah.
so you read all these stories. Were there any? So you mentioned Ender's Shadows, Ender's Games; those are great. Orson
No.
Scott Card. Were there any other like things you remember reading specifically at the time?
Yeah, he's actually only a few years older than me. I think I was 14 or 15.
I know what
Correct
you're gonna
me.
say.
Aragon, the
Yeah,
Aragon series. Yeah,
yeah.
because he's so young. He's only 4 years older than me, and I just thought he was remarkable. Like as a teenager, he was 18. Yeah, because he was 18 and I was 13 or 14 when it came out. And I'm blanking on his name. He's a famous
Chris Paolini,
Christopher. Chris. Yep. Yeah.
Christopher Paolini. Yeah,
And the first Aragon book really motivated me. I was like, oh, like he was also inspiring to a lot of people in our generation. Like you don't have to be an adult. You don't have to be you're not, or you don't have to be like from 40, 50, 60 years ago um, to write these stories. We're gonna write them in our generation, and that was really inspiring. And I was terrible at it. I mean, Corey can attest. Like I said at the beginning, I was great at world building, but I've never been able to do what, and that's why I asked Corey for Corey's help years ago, to build out the characters, the storylines, the micro, as I call it, and build all of that, even down to as I think and hope everyone knows, just the flavor text and how it intertwines with each other on every card we make. But I was writing some, yeah, I just wanted to make a world that was really different than my own. Not to get too political or religious minded in the conversation, but this is really important. Where I grew up was heavy Southern Baptist in rural Tennessee, so if you weren't surrounded by angels, there were demons inside of you, and Magic the Gathering also, which we all met playing Magic. That's a whole other. We'll do a whole other night where we talk about how we all met and how we made Luminous the game versus the world. But Magic has angels and demons, and the very first thing I really wanted to do at like 12 was not have a world that has the way we look at organized religion and does not have angels and demons in it, right? And that's natural. I think a lot of people from the Bible Belt or for the South were just like, hey, like let's do something. Like let's. I just definitely wanted to do something different. This is why when we have bees and dragons and we talk about them in Luminous and as as a replacement for, not as direct replacement, but a replacement for angels and demons, where the bees are order and the dragons are chaos, and they are at war with each other. And then we have luminous and luminous flowers and everything the bees are doing, and we'll dive into that. I certainly would love to talk about that a bunch as well. So that was probably the core of the short stories, and for a while I didn't know they were all intertwined. And the I guess spoiler is that I was writing a bunch of short stories and I didn't realize they were all in the same world for quite a while. I know that sounds weird, but I didn't realize like they all could just fit in the world if I made very small adjustments.
Yeah,
So,
you're just trying to kind of express yourself in whatever way you could, and this was kind of the outlet for the teenage Colin, middle school, high school. Yeah, that's great. And I also think like a caveat here is that like the world you built then is like inspiring Ardua, right? Like it's not like some of what you say might never happen in Ardua right now. Like it is all like the inspiration for the world we built the game on. Yeah.
oh yeah, that's a great. Thank you for saying that. And this is why I brought up Corey at the very beginning. But yeah, when I said everything to him, I said, okay, then take everything I just said and make it your own, add to it, or don't use some of it if it's important for a more narrative or story driven arc we're going to go on. In fact, Corey and I have even talked about a bunch of the ideas that I had some ideas for short stories, and we were thinking about having me come out with a collection at some point. We're very busy. I've written like two or three of the six that I'd want to write in full. To and Colin, yeah, I sent you one. That was just like for fun, but we thought about those being like not not like old tales or like things that mothers and fathers told their kids before they went to bed, not it actually happened or
Yeah.
it was ever real in this world, as a way to also bring a bunch of the old short stories I wrote into the world as part of the stories they tell, but it's not actually
Yeah. Like in
definitively
world
inside world, yeah, building.
in
Yeah,
world like boogeyman stories, in world kind of nursery rhymes, that kind of stuff, which is really interesting.
yeah,
It's an interesting way to incorporate some of like the original ideas into like what is inevitably going to change, because I mean any great story changes from conception to final product. I mean that's true of all writing, great, basically. So that's really interesting.
yeah.
So you wrote like how many of these short stories did you write, do you think? Like what, like were you doing it just for like a year? Did you get inspired for like, what, like eighth grade, or was it like a process through like up until I met you when you were a freshman in college? Like how long was this going on?
Yeah, yeah. You would be, I mean, we already do have a podcast, but you would be an amazing podcast host. We'll continue to do this. It helps frame and direct me, and I'm grateful. Yes, that's a perfectly. So it's like it comes in these spurts. Anyone that's creative will know, especially when I'm just like trying a lot of things when I'm a kid. I got like really into soccer and basketball, so and just stopped writing. So I wrote a ton when I was 12, 13, and 14. Then I wrote an extraordinary amount at 18 and 19. And then for different reasons in my 20s, I just didn't, I thought it was cool, but it was like something I'd done a long time ago and I never really finished any of the projects. And then I realized they could all, it was much later in my late 20s. I'm 34 now, about to be 35. So it was like 6, 7 years ago in my late 20s where I was like, oh, this is all better than I gave it credit for. I can put it all. Like I really do believe in this. I'd like to do this more. I'd like to dust off the old tomes, and put all the stories together. I'm so everything that is luminous for the bumblebees came at 12, 13, 14, At 14, I wrote a story called The Seven Eggs, The Seven Falling Eggs or something, which is a great title for a 14-year-old. Like, that's what they are. But it was about how dragon eggs landed on this plane of existence, and then they took in the atmosphere that was around them so that they could like live and breathe when they hatched. And all seven of them landed in seven different biomes and could do seven different things. That was a short story on its own, and I didn't put that all together until like many years later. But there's some really crazy things from those short stories. There are not dwarfs in our world or elves, right? That was a very Tolkien inspiration I had at 12 and 13 and 14. I'm trying to find my own voice. So the rock dragon that landed sneezed when he was born, and it's this magical snot from him landed on a rock and created the first dwarfs. And like looking back now, like I mean, Corey can be like, I mean, we laugh about it now. Like that's
Yeah,
not going to happen at all
yeah,
in Luminous. We don't even have dwarfs, but it was like really some of them, like looking back and reading them, are like creative but really goofy little side quests. But essentially, it's all come together now in a much more coherent form, leading into and much more organized and prepared. And then I realized I wouldn't be able to do it at the level I wanted to do it, and I would rather work on the game. And that's when shared it all with Corey.
yeah. I'm really
Yep,
interesting. I'm really interested to see where
yep.
like some of those inspirations end up in the actual game itself, in the actual lore of the world and story. Well, it's all lore of the world, I guess, kind of to your point earlier, but like where some of those like ideas, your original ideas kind of mix with like the actual story that's being told. Cause like it you handed off all of this like like interesting world building and stuff, and like a lot of it might make it in like some ways or another, and I'm really interested to kind of see where that ends up being, because like starting frankly starting a new IP with a new world and all that stuff is like challenging. There's a lot of things that go into it, and it is something that sets us apart in that we're coming into the space with like a fully fleshed out IP. Like that's the goal, at least. The goal is to have this world, this story, this rich, like these rich characters, things like that. And it's, I think we're lucky to have had a head start on that, with like your kind of like all of that time you spent in middle and high school, kind of working through. I mean, how many different. I know when we started 3 or 4 years ago when you brought me on, we talked a little bit about this, and you had like dozens of like races, fantasy races, basically. And I'm curious,
Yeah,
like, not to, because like I want to be a little careful here, because like some of this is kind of like spoilers. Like we haven't
yeah,
talked about some of this stuff yet, and like I don't know where it's going to end up, but like where did you? So like let's talk about the Patu. I don't know if the Patu will ever make it into our game, but like I remember
oh,
distinctly you talking about the
mhm.
Patu as like an idea, and like where did you come up with these like fantasy races that are, some of them are pretty distinct, or some of them are pretty familiar. You know, we have the dwarves, we have all of that stuff. Like those are kind of familiar fantasy tropes
Yep,
that you expect to see them. Like the Kenda are tree folk. They have their own little twist, but like they're tree
right,
folk. We can't use that term, all that stuff. But like, you know, at the end of the
right.
day, they're tree people. With their own little twist and their things. But like, where did you get some of the inspirations from the more off the walls one? If you want to explain like what the Patu are again, don't
Yeah,
know if this is going to make it in the game, but like,
it's a it's a great spoiler, and maybe they will be like faction 16 to come out someday. That'd be my dream.
or there might
I
be a
don't know.
card with one of them or something. Like, but yeah,
Yeah,
they're
yeah.
really, they're just like, you have all these like, I remember you telling me all these ideas and like
Mhm.
these like crazy characters and things that you just had in your head and you had to get out.
Yeah, I mean, for anyone that wants to be a writer, I would say that I had a lot of self-doubt in my 20s, and you should just write it all down and share it with someone, or finish the short story and share it with your friends, or post on Reddit or whatever. Share it with a Discord. It brought me an immense amount of peace, almost like, I know this sounds a little weird. I've heard other writers say this. It was something that was given to me. I didn't really create it, and I have to share it with the world, or I'm in like trouble when I die, whatever that means, or wherever I go. But I haven't thought about the two in a long time, like actually over a year. So They're a like half bear, half porcupine sentient race that I so if we go to like bumblebees are the creators of everything in this world, then at least on this continent, and they create magical luminous flowers that are very rare. Any flower can become one, and if you were to grab it and use it, you would wilt it and destroy it, but you would try to focus your brain and be able to get one magical ability off in that time. It's a limited magic system. Shout out Sanderson and all of the YouTube videos. He shares them, by the way. If you also care about creative, anyone ever watching this that cares about creative writing, he shares all of his videos from BYU. It's one of his stipulations to teach there for free on YouTube when it comes to creative writing and world building. But
Yeah,
limited magic
shout out
systems.
Sanderson. We'll be at Dragonstone Nexus in December, actually.
Yes, we will. And yes, and he's obviously an incredible writer, very well known. But I think the unique limited magic systems really spoke to me even at an early age because I just thought it was crazy that Harry Potter could just like shoot infinite amount of spells out of a wand and never run out of mana. And people that play like classic World of Warcraft would be like, yeah, you would have run out of mana like right away. Like that actually makes it what it is. Limited magic systems create that tension and also leave an extraordinary amount of room open for medieval fantasy, meaning Corey can write a story where we had one flower on us and we used it and it didn't work and now we have to fight or flight. We have to like we can't just use magic. We have to try to fight with the swords we have or we run. And like we it just it's instead of just shooting off thousands of spells. So
Yeah,
where
it's
was
not
I
like
going
you're
with that?
inherently born
Got
with
distracted.
magic. Like you have to like
Right.
you
Oh, the
the
bees.
magic comes from something else. The source of magic comes from something else. You might learn how to use magic maybe slightly better or
Hmm.
worse because you've practiced with it. I mean, that's what Velna
Yes.
Velna, for instance, in our story
Hmm.
in The Wanderers, she's an old mage basically who is very well practiced, but she's also a warrior because she has to be a warrior also. So like
Yep.
in our world, there's very few pure mages unless they have an orb to constantly
Right.
replenish their energy, right? So, so you had that idea
So
early.
sorry. So yeah, so the bees were like that was and we actually not to get too sidetracked because Colin will keep me on track. But we didn't even call the game Luminous for a long time, and I had the stories for Luminous. We had Luminous blooms in the game, and then we were like, why don't we call this game Luminous? That's like we had this kind of epiphany moment, and then
We were
but
sitting at dinner with
yeah, we were all
yeah,
together at the point at that moment
yeah,
actually at dinner. Yeah,
yeah.
like
You
with our
when you came to
spouses and
me when
everything.
you came to me, Colin, the name was bad.
It was terrible.
It was
It was
it was a
terrible.
cool name. It was a bad name for a game that we wanted to. Yeah, it was
We will
called
dive into
Arduous.
all of that.
Yeah,
Oh yeah, we call it was called Arduous for a long time, but we will dive all into that on the game night. But anyways, focusing on the Patu, uh, so I knew that I just knew that the bees were going to be a really big part of the world for a really long time. I had also in Tennessee, the real reason, I don't know if I've ever said this to you, Colin. There's a lot of beekeepers about an hour north and like north an hour and a half northeast of like where I grew up. And I just like went to like farming weekends as a
mhm.
kid and would like meet a bunch of beekeepers who would describe to me like how they do what they do. And I knew people that like only ate bee honey and bread and had only eaten it for like 20 years and hadn't died. I've
Seems
got a bunch of
unhealthy.
crazy stories about like people I met in my childhood just by happenstance. But that's certainly why I like just like knew a bunch of beekeepers in rural Tennessee. So that's why I like loved bees and thought they were like the coolest thing as a 12-year-old. The what start with the Patu came many years later. The Batu came in my late 20s actually when I was revisiting like, oh, okay, the bees make honey. And then I was like, well, I don't want it to just be the flowers. If imagine if you ate the honey, what would happen if you ate magical honey? And there basically became a group of species that evolved because they ate the honey and it gave them sentience. So in short, that's where the Patu came from, and they were a new rising species. So in the time that humans had not been on the continent, they were there for a long time with the ancients. They were gone for a long time. Now they're returning. That's why we're in this like
So
medieval
the
fantasy.
Patu were around when the ancients were around. No, no, the humans were around.
The humans were around,
Yeah.
but
Okay.
again, Corey.
Yeah.
I mean, by the way, anything we
We
say
talk. Yeah.
tonight, Corey. Yeah, we already said that.
Yeah.
Corey can just say, but this was like the original idea was that like they were fairly new, same as the Kinda in this in the absence of humans, the bees were, and the whole world was like just on a massive, very fast evolutionary track where these bear porcupine creatures were eating so much of it that they like built their own civilization and had become sentient and were living along the coasts and spearfishing into the water and building coastal villages and boats and becoming exactly what a beginning of a seafaring coastal civilization would be, except they were like these giant bears with thousands of like very long, almost magical looking, and at times like colorful uh, porcupine-like spikes. And that I don't know where that came from, except we know that bears like honey, and
Right. Yeah.
it would
That's
be
step
like
one.
they would eat it, and they'd be some of the first creatures to eat it, and then that would be a really like if I'm trying to move away because we purposely do not have elves or dwarfs in Luminous at all. Like if I'm trying to be something different genuinely and not just repeat the same species. There's no goblins as another example at all in Luminous. We don't plan to. We want a bunch of just a little bit nature magical themed things that are growing or evolving on the continent. And I love that you brought them up because the Patu are one that we don't know how to make a faction out of them yet.
They
And they're
might
not
never you might never see a Patu, but it is one of those
right.
things where like I remember you
Yeah.
that was one of the early races you talked about. And there's some other races I don't think Corey would appreciate us talking about because that like I'm pretty sure are going to be in the
Mm.
factions, but that was one that I know is like who knows. And also yeah, Colin said it earlier, take all of this with a grain of salt for the story of Luminous. Like
Yeah.
what actually gets presented is like the bees, all that stuff is like loose inspiration. Like who knows what's going to end up being there? Because I know Corey has some ideas in store as well. But it's just really fascinating to hear like where all of this came from. I know like did you always plan talk about like the world of Ardua? Like it
Mm.
and this I know is different from your first inspiration as far as like the like the continent as big as a planet, like all of that stuff. Like I know like you had some really out there ideas for like what like the continent was, the capital C continent. And I know this has changed some since. So like I'm
This
yeah.
I like what Corey's doing a lot more, and my idea was just too it was just too much, and it
It's like
didn't need.
impractical from like a physics standpoint, I remember.
Yeah, this is great. So
Yeah.
this is where it all like 7 years ago. Uh, I'll try to say the story a little backwards this time, a little Tarantino on purpose. The story literally ends where I just started emailing different professors at universities I wasn't going to in my late 20s, long after I had graduated college. And then one responded and then just had a very long conversation with me. But this was before the James Webb telescope went up. We've learned quite a bit since then. But this is still perceived to most likely be impossible, where one planet can go through really tumultuous, near catastrophic levels of destruction because it moves from orbiting one sun to orbiting another sun. So the suns are far away from each other and the planet's in the middle, but every once in a while it can like get put into the other sun so that it makes like an infinity, like an eight, like the sideways eight symbol. And we're not doing that. That would also mean an astrophysicist like science, like an actual teacher, like professor, did confirm that there would be no moons. If that was even possible, there would be absolutely no chance that there'd be any moons, which I thought was interesting. We have art already that has a moon in it in our world. So I want everyone to be clear. Everything I'm saying is not how it actually. This is not the real thing. This is like what I presented to Corey, and then we moved it from there. But at the same time, I was basically everything about the physics wasn't going to work either. not that it has to. I just wanted to ask and know from at this 7 years ago at the time. But the world being like the size of Jupiter, but made out of almost entirely water, and then there being a lot of continents, but because they were so far away from each other, none of them knew the other one was there. And the original reason I did this was just to try to fix something that seemed very frustrating in World of Warcraft, which was an island appears right between two continents that are close to each other, and we're supposed to believe that for 5 years nobody ever found it. I know that that's not important at all to the story, but it was always just so like, why, how?
Hey, you can
Uh,
also get on a boat that'll take you there in about 12 seconds, Colin. So
exactly. Right over to the other one. But and I was like, I don't want what a lot of stories I had noticed as well might appear at first to be fantasy and then turn into science fiction, right? Where to leave the world, if we've already established the world, to have a second or third book in a series, it's like turns out
it was
the
aliens
it was
or yeah,
aliens, or we
whatever.
have to
Yeah,
go to
yeah.
another planet, or we weren't on a continent, we were in a simulation, or this hedge mage wasn't our whole world. We were actually being watched like mice. Like I could go on and on about like every variation. I was like, I just want it to be that where we were at the beginning matters and is super important, and we stay there for a long time. So now I'll talk about everything that stayed the same. The world shrunk significantly in size.
It's still
There's multiple.
massive. It's still
It's still
quite big.
massive.
Yeah.
It has moons, it orbits one sun, and it has still is a lot of water, and the continents are far enough away from each other that we still get a lot of that tension. And instead of the continent being the size of Pangea, it's just like a large continent. We haven't decided exactly how large, but it still has that same feeling that um, I feel like this is true in a lot of video games that we love as well, that like if you fall in love with the continent you started on, you want to develop expansions on that continent and watch the world change on that continent, not leave it forever and it's not important anymore and we never go back. So that's really what Corey kept the essence of that.
Yeah, and I
So
mean,
I just
I think
yeah.
also that's true in the Wanderers as well. Like the main character of the Wanderers, Rhea, she is from one of these other continents that has developed entirely separately from the continent that we're on, and even our humans that are on Ardua are from another continent that is separate from the one Raya was from. So like, but it is these like years long journeys to get from continent to continent. So it's just the level of
Yeah.
technology they're at right now is just like it's there. It is another world for all intents and
Yeah.
purposes. So like I think that your original idea was really like strong and like really it was a good backbone for like exactly what you're meaning. Like we'll be on this continent for a while. Like it is I mean the humans have explored like less than 5% of it. You know what I mean? Like it's because
Right.
it's so dangerous and it's so hard to go out and about. The Wanderers, the whole deal, if you've noticed, like in the art and in the general like vibe of it, it's very jungle exploration. It's very exploratory in its style because a lot of it is like, well, our capital city's gone. We have to go explore. We cannot be comfortable anymore. We have to go find new places. And that's dangerous and it's hard and it's arduous, you might even say. So
Yes.
it is one of those things where that is still true, and you've given us this great like backdrop of this huge continent. I think that it is really smart to give us a lot of room for our expansions and our expanding world and our expanding story and things like
Yeah.
that, while still having like I know the main like you had a main character and everything, and that's changed pretty drastically like through the process as well, as far as like
Yeah.
the overall main narrative is pretty different, I would say. um as far as like, and I don't want to really touch the main narrative too much because
I was
like
gonna
that
say.
could get into spoilers. But I know like
Yeah.
Raya wasn't the main character in your stories and all, like we have a, but
Silver.
there's like there's not very few characters are the same, which is, you know, to be expected. But like I know the core of the story is still similar.
Yeah. It is. It is. And we wanted a continent that wasn't fully explored at the beginning, because we also don't we have a lot of ideas on what we want to do the next 5 years, but as we live in this very optimistic world where like we really believe we can do this both as a game and as a world building exercise for 10 or plus years, that you just also don't want to like pigeonhole yourself. And this island in itself, this continent, this giant continent, allows us, like, we feel very confident that we could build 12 to 16 factions over 5 to 10 years of development and still feel comfortable like exploring the island, and
Yeah.
being able to legitimately articulate and point to like where they are on the island, and it's real and you feel like it's real, and you know who you're playing as and why that, why these factions are uh, vying for control, even if it's of their space. It's not like they're all like, I'm going to take over the whole continent and rule and be a dictator. I don't think almost any faction is thinking that. It's more about just placing them in the world. And then, of course, we're breaking the narrative when you play against another faction, because some of them are not uh,
That's why there's 2 favored.
physically close, not physically close to each other
I
in
mean,
there. Yeah.
that's the thing is like,
Yeah.
and all of the factions, even the ones we make 5 years from now, technically exist currently, or probably exist currently in the story, right?
Yes.
Like, so, like, all of these factions exist right now. We're just seeing like little vignettes of them as they come up in the story or as we develop them, things like that. So, like, factions we come up with 3 or 4 years from now already exist in the world. Like, they're it's not like they're popping into existence. And eagle-eyed viewers of the flavor text of the Wanderers would see, and even maybe some of the writing in our on our website and in our social posts and things like that might see hints for future factions that might exist or might not. Um, there's and we're definitely not done exploring kind of the more monstrous, what people might consider, what humans might consider monstrous races. We're really interested in expanding the um, kind of like bringing some of your vision of what are some of these other unique fantasy races to life. Um, I think that that's one of the unique things that we have on our side is that we, as a company, as a business, as a game, we're fully open. We're not beholden to an IP. We're not beholden to make sure things look or act a certain way. We want things to be familiar, but also not the same. So we have like this sci fantasy world, which I don't know was in your initial kind of like intent either, but like I think it positions us. Yeah, actually, that's actually a good topic. Like, was it always going to be like a sci fantasy world? Because like that's kind of where we ended up, like with the relics, the ancient relics. That are like, was it always going to be sci fantasy, or was it more fantasy?
Yeah, it's a great question. And yeah, I love and agree with everything you said as well. Just very briefly, that's a really important distinction. These factions are all on the continent doing things right now. We're just revealing them in the way that we can present and create
Yeah,
products, versus a very small island where another faction arrives on a boat and it happened in like the same time frame. So
yeah. All
even
of these
if
factions are having they all have their own
right,
motivations, and they're all doing things right now in the story.
right,
We're just not
we,
being we're, the magnifying glass isn't on them right now, but they're all doing
exactly.
stuff. They all exist. They're all doing stuff.
Yeah, exactly. As in regards to the world, and I haven't. I mean, I didn't I okay, like this is true for every person who like you read a book, you have an idea of what the main character looks like. You just develop them. You use some context clues from the writer, they give you an idea, and then you make the final version of that person. And then the movie comes out and you're like, that doesn't look anything like the person I thought of in the book. This happens to all of us in some way, shape, or form. When the art started coming in, I've never said this to Colin or Corey. When the art started coming in, I was like, this is incredible and about 200 years further than I ahead than I thought. But nothing is wrong. That's the difference too. Like when we're building out an IP, we have control over everything. And my first thought was like, we just came to the world and we're turning on the orbs back to the world. We just came to the continent again. We were turning the orbs back on, and then they can turn relics on, and that's crazy. And then they're like, but they're the very infancy of it. As the art started to come in, I thought it doesn't matter what my original idea was. This is awesome because we are more of a science fiction fantasy combination. But we were, on my mind, we were always heading there as a world. Like this was going to happen. So the fact that it's I always say in my mind 200 years further along, didn't take away anything from what I thought. If anything, it leaves room, like in all of these stories, to write short stories of prequels, or a little, even just me writing a short story of a cool prequel, or writing a story from, we don't know the exact amount of time yet, let's just say 1,000 to 2,000 years ago, when the
Yeah.
ancients
Who
just
know? Who
disappeared, and
knows?
we,
Like honestly.
right.
Yeah.
And it's kind of cool, we haven't actually picked a number.
I
Corey
don't
has
think
said
yeah,
like
I don't think we know, honestly.
but I was gonna say Corey has said 1,600. I said 3,000, and then I realized I said out loud, "Oh, it's kind of cool that no one knows how long it's been."
Yeah.
Like that actually plays into a deeper understanding of, or a lack of understanding that all of these people have. It's just this had to be a really long time ago, but we can't really tell because these relics aren't aging. This glass isn't breaking. This metal isn't rusting. So it's very hard to be able to articulate how long ago it was. But even if we do
Yeah, and we
prequels,
don't
I
have
wrote,
carbon dating. There's no carbon dating
right,
because they're again, like I think to your point though, the
right,
world is in a spot where like the technology is kind of 200 years ago. Like the technology
mhm,
they brought with them is about 200 years ago. But because they found these relics, they haven't advanced past that from a technological standpoint. They are using so like their whereas like Raya, she lands their technology has advanced 200 years because they
yes,
didn't have magic, they didn't have relics, they didn't have these like
yep,
things. So like that's why they're still fighting with like swords and bows and stuff when like realistically they could be much further. I think it's really
it's
interesting.
true.
I think because like to your point, I think when we were developing like the art and the I think when we were developing the kind of like concepting of the Wanderers and like what this looks like, we kind of felt the same way. I think when we were getting the, we were like, this isn't like what we were expecting, but like it's awesome. And maybe Corey was, and I'm agreeing with you in that like to me it was
Yeah,
always much more medieval fantasy, but I think where we landed is much more interesting.
I agree. It's better. I mean, that's the thing too, is to clarify that I had, like, just like an actor and a director, like Tarantino taught literally, I'm just a big fan of the way he works and listening to actors talk about him. But he always says when he writes something, it's 50%. And then he has to find the person that is the other 50%. And then it in its whole becomes something much bigger than he could have ever done. This is what all of Luminous is. And like everything that, both Colin and Corey is like a team helping interact with each artist, write each art brief, and then the artists themselves making each piece of art.
For sure.
When it comes back in its entirety to me, it was like a whole team effort, and wherever it lands is, to your point, is like way more interesting and has so much more depth than what I would have been able to accomplish alone. So if I just don't want anyone to think, oh, it's 200 years wrong. It's 200 years in a really cool direction. That's probably, now that I like look at Hedge Tinker, for example, which is a card that's an art that stands out to me as 200 years further along than I anticipated. It's actually way cooler of a world to start a story in. So I completely agree with you as
Yeah.
well, Colin.
I think one of
Yeah.
the fun things about Hedge Tinker, we can talk about
Yeah.
Hedge Tinker a little bit because I think I agree with you,
Mhm.
is that that is a unique piece of art in that because the continent is large, I think the art is that is from a faction in the world that will be or it's from a I say faction in the traditional sense. They are a
Mhm.
group an organization in the world that is very wealthy. So they what you're seeing in that picture is a
Yep.
snapshot of the wealthiest. That is the top tier level of technology. Whereas like I think you can get the exact opposite where there's basically someone with no technology, no relics that is living in that like 200-year ago kind of like vibe. So I like that we have like the full gamut. Whereas like I think Hedge Tinker is a great example of like what the actual people who utilize the resources that are presented the most can get out of it. But there's also people still living in like thatch roof cottages. So like
They are.
yeah.
It
In fact,
yeah, and
most people probably are still living in like that kind of more that tier than the super wealthy. So
uh,
it's very interesting. Like Head Shinker is a very interesting card piece of art, and I think the Wanderers in general has like a few pieces of art that kind of stand out as a little jarring from a uh like consistency point of view, like, so there's some zippers on some cards, which, like, zippers probably wouldn't exist because they're a pretty modern invention, but, like, that's just something, again, not a huge deal. It's not a mistake, but it is definitely something that, like, you learn. Me and Corey, if you're interested in, like, this full discussion, me and Corey spent an hour talking about it. I think it was our second or third episode. You can go back and listen to it. We for anyone listening to this in the past, like, we spent a lot of time talking about kind of like the weird art inconsistencies or like idiosyncrasies that happen, because we were brand new to it. But yeah, I agree with you, Colin. Like, we definitely had a different idea, even in development before we started getting art.
Hmm.
Because the first pieces of art we got weren't even from the Wanderers. They were, the Kendo, which are fantasy race. Like, they're very
Yep.
it's we didn't know, like, that was easy relative to like the developing the full Wanderers and like the Disciples, which are like crazy. So like,
Right.
yeah, so, like, I 100% agree with you where we got, like, some of these pieces of art back and, like, the artist interpretation of, like, the brief we gave them, and it was just like, "Wow, okay, I guess this is what we're doing," and I wouldn't change anything.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and it is easy for me to say this. Well, one, because I'm not the two of you and I'm not on that team. Essentially, I know that I'm in the room a lot
sure.
and working with you on the art stuff, but more not working with, more like listening as the two of you lead it. But I think it bothers the zippers and like the shoes bother you and Corey
Oh,
more
for
than me
sure, definitely.
because one, it was our first go at it, and two, you're right. Not only have we gotten way better at wanting something to be more congruent. But I also just don't think people are like have the magnifying glass out and being
No.
like, look at those shoelaces on the
It
hedge
doesn't
tinker. This game
for
is terrible. Like the art is in that piece of art is incredible, and you don't think about the I. In fact, if and then now we've just said it or revealed it, but if Corey hadn't said look at the shoes on that, I never would have looked at the shoes because the
yeah.
I thought the orbs holding it up looked so cool and the background and everything. So it's it
For what it's worth, these none of these are
right.
mistakes. Like none of this is a
Right.
mistake. It's not. It's just something that
It's
is like,
interesting though.
yeah, it's definitely an interesting like learning experience. Like, it's like, again, like me and Corey talk a full hour about this. Is like, it's just funny. It's just funny the things you don't think to like look for until they happen, and then you're like, oh yeah, I guess they wouldn't have like pearl snap buttons. Like, that's a very modern invention. Like, you need a machine to make a pearl snap button. Like, it's that kind of stuff is like,
Right.
yeah, it's and again, no one, if we hadn't said that there's zippers on some of the clothing, no one would have noticed. Maybe someone would have, and they would have been like, this wouldn't exist, but it's not a big deal. It's just very funny. And it's that kind of stuff that adds to that, like, it's 200 years in the future kind of stuff. Like,
Yeah.
it's that kind of like, those kinds of, like, small things that kind of add, and who's to say there isn't a factory somewhere run by an orb that makes zippers? There could be. The ancients
Right.
probably had zippers.
Right. Exactly. I mean, yeah, I was gonna say like that
So
there's you can always oh am I did I cut out?
no, no, you're good.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I feel the same way. And I love everything that we have in there. And you can always because it's also I always say like to the team, like, it's our world. What's to say they
Yeah.
didn't find a bunch of zippers and be like, what and they have pictures from the ancients wearing them and
Now
be like, we would
will
have
you see
dressed like them.
zippers? Will you see zippers in the future? Probably not. You probably won't see
Right.
that many zippers in the future, but, like, who
Right.
someone found it. Someone found a nice cool jacket, and they love it.
Yeah, yeah, that's it's really depending on how it was isolated or preserved or whatever. But
Yeah.
we had a piece of art come in really early on for the Kenda, and it was like a female figure of a human, and we were like, well, they're not actually mammals, so she wouldn't feed her young like that. And really, we had to have this conversation. We literally, Corey and I were like, well, wait a minute, they're like tree creatures, so they don't really even have male or female and like and then and then we're on this like 2-hour rabbit hole of like, well, then what is clothing to them? Why would they wear clothing? Do they need any clothing? Have
Yeah.
they ever developed clothing? If a sentient tree creature wanted to make clothing, what would it look like? So again, and this is a little bit of one of Sanderson's lectures, the iceberg. We have to stop ourselves sometimes because the iceberg is like show the audience a very small amount and make it rich and full and real, but don't spend thousands of hours actually developing out the 90+% underneath it because you really actually don't need it. We do start to go down the rabbit holes, and I'll say like iceberg to Corey. I haven't in a long time, but I brought that up to him before. I was like, okay, we can just iceberg this because we could talk for 100 hours and build out a deep lore of the Kenda's clothing, or we could just agree on just the tip of the iceberg and make something really cool and then just kind of run with it because that is good enough to accomplish this goal today because we have so many things and so many factions that we're working on. So, but that just,
Yeah.
I mean, that just also opens the door for us to continue to add to that in the future. But yeah, we have like, we've had some amazing conversations as we develop species to then try to put ourselves in those shoes and ask ourselves to not, it's actually one of the craziest thought exercises I've ever done. Like, don't think like a human. You're not a human. What would you do or not do? Because we have all these preconceived ideas of, well, they have to have clothing on. It's like, do they if they're a tree? Like,
We ended
we've had,
for the record,
yeah,
we ended up with yes, they do have clothing.
they have some cool clothing.
Yeah.
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 And yeah, more, and then yeah, I mean, it's Corey. The final that conversation ended with Corey. Like, I mean, if but like it could also just be a huge cultural statement. We can do so much. We can make them look so different. We can we can show people from different uh I almost said houses or families, but I think family or like tree or like group of tree that they're together, and yeah, it was really cool to see that come to life. But we do have a very distinct and much more articulate and clear definition. The art briefs have gotten way more specific, as I'm sure Corey has spoken to. We made a point to not have like guns, for instance, with the Xantha, the pirate faction. Like it's not like guns and gunpowder pirates. It's where would a flower or an orb replace a gun? And we've had so much creativity with that as well. Even socketing orbs into eyeglasses or a pipe or a peg leg instead of being made out of wood, being made out of an orb or glass,
Right.
ancient glass. So that's been so much fun to like play on those some of those tropes, but also make it our own. And we've really done the art that's come in for the factions is just incredible. It keeps
It's
getting
super
better.
good. Yeah, it really
Yeah.
fleshes out the world in a pretty unique way, and we're already, I mean, we're already concepting the Wanderers 2 and some of the next factions as well as like figuring out like what
Yep.
the next stage of like what the world looks like. I think one thing I have it on the screen here. This is like one of the only pieces of like landscape art we have. I'm showing the like
Yep.
piece that Alessandro did for us. It is we
Yeah.
really want to explore like what the world looks like more in the art. We don't have, our resources are orbs in the game, so like we don't have as maybe as a good way to kind of show off like the world outside of like concept art or like splash marketing pieces, things like that. So like we're trying to figure out unique and fun ways to incorporate kind of like what makes the world unique and dangerous and mysterious in more unique interesting ways, which has been fun, and that's something that I know we're really interested in doing in like the Wanderers too, and even some of the faction pieces. Now I know there's a Xantha piece that has some pretty crazy stuff happening in the background. I'm not going to spoil it, but it is pretty cool to like give artists kind of the free reign to be like, put something crazy in the background and just see what they come up with, which is kind of fun. Artists
Yep.
typically love being told do whatever you want. By the way, it's great. They don't, um, which is another, again. If you're interested in the art process and all of that stuff, that was a good conversation.
Yep.
But yeah, so I think from a world like taking your ideas, kind of because we're nearing the end here,
Mhm.
but just like
Mhm.
taking what you had in your head from like 12, 13, 14, 17, 18. So I guess you weren't writing any stories when you were too busy in college playing magic, making friends, being social, things like that. And then
Yeah.
like rediscovering them later in life and kind of taking those like core concept, those ideas that you had and like seeing what it's become in the last, 4 years, like, what does that mean to you? Like, what do you like, how does it feel for you as the creator to see kind of like what it's become?
Yeah, it's incredible. And I'm very, very lucky. Like it's like what I said at the towards the beginning. The stories, I was bored in the backyard at like 12, and most of what the world has become has literally come out of that and sprouted out of that, blossomed out of that is what I was gonna say, and then I just caught myself because I was like, "Oh, the luminous flower." I can be a dad and like say dad jokes or eye rolls all day about this, but it's really, yeah, no, in a genuine way, it is way bigger than me now. That's what I always wanted. I have shared it. It hopefully will outlast me and people can add to it. Corey has already made it just as much his as it is mine. And the stories and the characters that he builds are infused into everything that I saw with a stick, like running around in the backyard as a kid. And we still have so many species to show and so much of this world. There's a ton of ideas that I've taken that I presented to the team and have turned into something far better than my first idea, even of what the species could do or its place in the world. And a ton of them are going to join this world. There's so many more things than just humans. And yeah, yeah, we'll actually get into a little bit about the next time we speak. There's a few other things that are similar to this feeling that I'm trying to articulate right now that have happened along the game development as well, and that'll certainly be the next thing I'm excited to talk about. But just watching it become something that's bigger than me and seeing the world, it, I wanted to make something that like my family, kids, I don't have any kids right now, but if I had kids in the future, or even if my wife's older sister has two young boys, I spent a bunch of time with them. And if they read these stories and grew up knowing this world, then I thought it would be a success. And now we have almost 400 people in the Discord, and we haven't even done our first Kickstarter yet, and we're just beginning this journey. And there's so many people that come to me or say things like, what if the species could do this and do that?" And just to see it all outgrow me. I said that to Colin 3 years ago at a Kirby Lane in Austin. I said, the dream is that this doesn't die with me. I had this weird feeling that the creative spirits, whatever happens in the next life, wherever we go or whatever adventure we all head off on, that they would be very upset with me if I didn't share this all and pass it on. And I've done that. That brings me a lot of peace, except we're like 1% of what we need to do.
Yeah.
So we still have quite an adventure ahead. It's weird to speak to all this when it's been 7 years for me, 4 years for most of the team, and we haven't done the first Kickstarter yet. And someone will walk up to us in like 5 or 10 years and be like, "Wow, you guys came out of nowhere. You guys are a massive overnight sensation." And it will be funny to anyone listening to this now, or even in the years to come in the future, or to this whole team to be like, "No, this is just like a passion we've had for 2 decades, and you just found out we exist." And I think about that all the time. So those stories I have a bunch of short stories. We'd like to put a collection of short stories together from my side of things that are, like I said, not the official lore. And then, not that he already isn't extraordinarily busy, but someday when I clone Corey in a magical orb device, the clone of Corey will start writing novels for this world, and then it will be
I
then
I'm
we'll then
f
we'll really be there.
I'm frankly most excited for when, like, someone else writes a story for us. I think, like, that will be
Yeah,
really cool.
yeah,
So yeah, and
yeah,
it's, it's only a matter of time. It's really excited. I'm very happy you decided to share the story as well, because I wouldn't be here. Otherwise I would not. I will say this, I would say if you'd asked me in 2021 or 2022 if I would be heading up a game development studio in 2026, I would say 0% that happens. So I'm
Yeah.
thankful. So this is great.
Um,
Yeah, and
it-
so that I mean that's gonna wrap it up for tonight. But as always, Discord link will be in the description. We have like Colin mentioned earlier, we have almost 400 people in there. There's discussions happening all the time. We're always looking for play testers for the new and upcoming factions. We run some tournaments, some events, online events, things like that. Just feel free to join. We're always happy to talk Luminous, either if it's the world or the story or the game itself, things like that. And
yeah.
as always, ask any questions you might have there.
Yeah, thank you. You're an amazing moderator, and we'll do exactly this, but for how the last 7 years of game development and how we all met in Magic and how we decided to move forward in making the game, and that is a more technical process, but it is another amazing adventure. So we'll do that soon.
All right. Hey, thanks for
Yeah.
tuning in, y'all. Talk to you later. Bye.